Hello, I'm Phil Mason. I'm the Head of Regulatory Engagement with Trustmark, and my role over this next session is to talk a bit about Trustmark, how we operate, how we deliver assurance, how we deliver consumer protection, and about the standards that are connected to Trustmark. Also, I'd like to talk a little bit about the huge opportunity that net zero brings to us as a retrofit sector and the wider construction sector, and also about some of the challenges, some of the supply chain challenges that are well documented that we know exist. This is the size of the opportunity that exists created by net zero as we move forward. There are 24 million homes that require retrofitting at one level or another across the UK over the next 26 years or so. And various estimates all seem to conclude in a similar place that the retrofit market, the net zero retrofit market, is worth about £600 billion in terms of delivering all those improvements. So it's very substantial. Yet it comes with a challenge of being able to generate a competent, trained supply chain in all the trades that are required. So there's the enabling trades, there's the remediation trades, and the pure retrofit trades required to deliver this this challenge that we have. So I won't go through all the figures, but I will pick some of them out. We know that the wider construction industry requires 217,000 new workers over the next 4 years. We know we need 270,000 new people entrance into the retrofit industry alone, and that somewhere in the region of about a fifth of the construction workforce is, give or take, around my age and will have retired by 2030. And then we know we've got a churn. So not only do we need to bring new entrants in, we need to bring entrants in to cover those that leave and take their experience with them. So in summary, we need around 1.3 million new professionals to be able to tackle the challenge and participate in the opportunity. So it's considerable. Trustmark is just a little bit about Trustmark. I won't dwell on this for too long, but I think it's important just to give a refresher for those of you that may not know. Trustmark is the government endorsed quality scheme for home improvements. We operate through scheme providers that are technically well placed to be able to deliver the standards and the Trustmark requirements down to their sectors and their membership, of which I think that number's gone up a little now, probably nearer 40 than 37 scheme providers that existed at the time this slide was made. There's around 15,000 registered businesses, and when we look at those 15,000 registered businesses, they employ somewhere in excess of 51,000 tradespeople through their own supply chains. So that's quite considerable when you look at it down at individual level. How Trustmark works. So essentially there are three licenses at play. Trustmark works under a master license agreement that is issued to us by the Department of Business and Trade, and that's how we must operate the scheme. And then in turn, what we do is work with and license scheme providers that are bound by the compliance requirements of something we call our framework operating requirements, and where they meet that initially and continue to meet it, they hold a license that enables them to register the all-important registered businesses beneath that deliver the work into the consumer's home, and they in turn are Trustmark licensed to be able to do that work. So it's a flow down from the Department of Business and Trade to Trustmark, from Trustmark to scheme providers, and then from scheme providers to the registered businesses that go into people's homes. So Trustmark is quite a broad church. I know that this morning we're interested in retrofit and energy efficiency, but it wouldn't be right to perhaps talk about Trustmark and not talk about all the trades that come in. So there's somewhere in the region of about 150. Something you might expect that the first few on there billed as electricians. This is only an indicative slide, but it's to just give me an opportunity to talk about some of the others that are in there. So we have garden landscapers, we have the Arborists Association, the tree surgeons, we have the National Carpet Cleaning Association, and all these are wider trades that people will have interest in having carried out from time to time in and around their properties, as well as all the traditional trades, and now with the new focus on the retrofit trades, which are of interest to us this morning. This is just a snapshot really that's been put together of some of the government funding that's been made available, particularly in areas where people need some help to heat their homes through the energy company obligation, through the Warm Homes Discount Scheme, and then the fairly newly introduced Great British Insulation Scheme. So we know ECO and the insulation scheme run until the end of March 2026. But when you look at the values against it, ECO is delivering £1 billion worth of measures per year of the scheme, and the Great British Insulation Scheme £1 billion worth of measures over its duration. Then we move down through some of the government funded capital schemes that exist here, the Home Upgrade Grant, and let's talk a little bit, because it's probably close to, so I understand, to some of you listening to the summit, the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, the original waves that came through. There was a top-up wave 2.2, which I believe is just about to start coming into delivery over the next few months. And then we learned at the end of last year, in December 2023, that there was an additional £1.25 billion allocated to the Social Housing Decarb Fund. Then it wouldn't be right to talk about the boiler upgrade scheme, which isn't a Trustmark delivery, but there is some substantial money being assigned to that, an original 450 million, which was boosted from the announcement back in December by another 1.5 billion. So it wouldn't be right to not talk about those. And there's two new schemes. We don't have the full detail yet, but LARS, the Local Authority Retrofit Scheme, and the Energy Efficiency Grant, new schemes, as I say, launching in 2025. So it'll be interesting to learn a bit more about those as they come online. By now, PAS 2035 will be a familiar document and process to the retrofitting community. It was first published in 2019, as most of us will know. We had a revision at the end of last year, so there's a 2023 version that's going through a transitional period currently. So Trustmark doesn't create the PAS. That's commissioned by the government through BSI. BSI bring together an industry representative steering group that then help deliver what that PAS looks like and review it from time to time to make sure that it's proportionate and can be actually physically delivered by the sector itself. So Trustmark brings something additional to that as requirements of the PAS as well, in terms of that's a technical standard that's given to us to carry the compliance elements around, but Trustmark is about consumer protection, and we also operate a well-practiced and developed disputes process, because the entire intention is that people that deliver under Trustmark get it right first time, and that is normally the case, but once in a while things go wrong and there needs to be a process by which things can be put right. So an important element of Trustmark is the Trustmark Data Warehouse, which is a facility where all the work that comes through ECO or through the funded schemes is lodged. What we then do is go in and interrogate the data and do desktop audits to make sure that the lodgement process has been followed, that the PAS 2035 process is compliant, and then what we do is take a risk view of where we then start to go on site to make sure that those processes translate into compliant works on site. As I say, it's risk-based. What we do is look at the known risk of a business, the complexity of the projects that are carried out and the type of measures that are carried out. And then what we do is we have reporting processes off that about volumes, about compliance processes, compliance levels, and we report back into DESNES, back into Ofgem. We report to the certification bodies of the volumes of work that PAS 2030 certificated businesses are carrying out. And more recently, we have a data sharing relationship with UCAS so that they can take a higher view over not only compliance but volumes of work that has been carried out. And those processes are starting to drive up higher levels of compliance within the retrofit sector, which is a really positive thing. Able to pay sectors. So we've spoken a little bit about how there's money to help with people putting heat pumps in. There's help with people that need more help to heat their homes, so in order to bring their bills down, to not only that but to bring their carbon emissions down, and these are people that need a little bit of support. But we've got an entire able to pay sector out there, so I won't go through the benefits of a retrofitted house against one that isn't retrofitted in detail, but we know that traditional dwellers, or not so much traditional dwellers, but unretrofitted standard dwellings have heat loss through fabric. They have typically a carbon fuel heating system, perhaps a gas boiler in the majority of cases, and standard energy consumption. By retrofitting a dwelling, does a number of things. Not only does it bring the carbon footprint down, it reduces energy consumption and fuel bills. And there is a lot of evidence now available, and it's physically translating into people having increased asset value. Their home is worth more if it's retrofitted to a higher level. So one of the things that's interesting about that is the banking and finance sector have got a really large role to play, and they're ready to play it as well, in terms of bringing in intelligent green finance mechanisms where people can understand why they want to retrofit, they can fund retrofit, and they can do it in financial terms that suit their budgets and their way of expenditure. So that's something, and I think there needs to probably to be more engagement from the able to pay sector over time, because they're a big part to play in getting to net zero as well. Just briefly then, since Trustmark's operated the data warehouse, we think we have about £2.5 billion worth of energy efficiency measures that have been lodged into there. And that's a split, as you might expect, 87% insulation and heating controls and 13% low carbon measures. So I'll talk a little bit about the numbers of registered businesses in the retrofit sector. Some 2,700 retrofit assessors, about 1,500 low carbon installers, and those are people that will be registered with MCS as well, organisations registered with MCS, but under the funded schemes there's a requirement for Trustmark as well. Some 870 PAS registered businesses, and bearing in mind these have got these 50,000 individuals within their supply chains beneath, and around 750 retrofit coordinators. Those figures need to rise because the supply needs to meet the demand, and as more and more funding comes into the sector, and as the able to pay markets are starting to react to retrofit, there needs to be a greater supply chain able to deliver these services. I touched on this, I suppose, delivered assurance. So Trustmark has seen an increase in first time compliance of standards since we took over something that used to be called technical monitor. We now call it assurance, but we do it by our risk-based process. We're not necessarily only driven by numbers. We form relationships with businesses, with assessors and coordinators, and if we find non-compliance, we tend to work with them to understand what the root cause is and help them increase their first-time compliance. And we have seen substantial improvement over the last 2 years or so since we've taken over the process. And we think we've done that through a little bit of education, a bit of relationship forming, and of course PAS 2035 will have played a role in all of that because it's a risk mitigation process. Before I go, I'd just like to return to the Great British Insulation Scheme very briefly. As we know, the objective of the scheme is to deliver high volume single measures. The Department of Energy and Security and Net Zero went through a round of public consultation, part of which was to establish if an alternative standard to PAS 2035, i.e. the Trustmark Licence Plus process, could be applied or integrated into the scheme for the installation of loft insulation and heating controls in low risk environments. Indeed, I think the volume of people that responded was almost split. It was almost 50% in favour of the Trustmark Licence Plus process. And the reason being, I think there was some concern expressed around the cost of PAS compliance for single measures in low risk and whether an alternative could be put in place. So those conversations go on, and they're quite interesting at a number of levels, because if that comes to, if the evolved Trustmark Licence Plus process becomes integrated into the insulation scheme, and I think more information one way or the other will be published in due course, and if that can be accepted also by the wider retrofit standard setting community, there is at least some potential that more proportionate process for low risk single measures could actually be incorporated into PAS 2035, which would help with engagement of the PAS 2035 process for single measures of that type in low risk. And it could likewise have a knock-on effect out into the able to pay market, where past 2035 has got very limited traction, despite the fact that it's a good risk mitigation process. It just hasn't been accepted outside the in any great volume outside the funded schemes in eco. So watch this space. All that is required of me now is to thank you very much indeed for listening. I hope it's been of some value to you, and I believe I will see some of you at the panel session, which will follow fairly shortly. So thank you very much indeed.